Welcome to another OUinsider.com podcast. I'm RJ Young. I'm joined by OUI staff writer Colin Kennedy. Colin, what's going on is Isaiah Coe. Go ahead, give me your thoughts on this because this is interesting, being that we talked about junior college kids and him the last time we spoke.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that we recently talked about on this very show, and I know a lot of people messaged me about it and said this was a really interesting conversation that we had a week ago or so, and then now, just a few days later, he makes the commitment official. It's fascinating because before then, it was kind of a mystery as to whether or not he'd be a take. You knew that some of the defensive line numbers were kind of adding up. Oklahoma felt it was in great position to land some of the top guys on their board, and so Coe's status kind of went up and down. You didn't necessarily know how this thing was going to pan out, but his commitment date never wavered. So when the clock was winding down, I mean, I was sitting there saying to myself, look, I mean, do I put the crystal ball in? I knew from people that I had talked to that Oklahoma was his leader. I mean, the guy has relationships with Sooners' upcoming stud Kendall Pettis. Perrion Winfrey was his former teammate at Iowa Western. I mean, Perrion was the starter ahead of Coe, and then eventually the two got to play together a little bit more. So knowing all of this and the relationship that he had with the staff, I mean, I think going into this commitment, I was sitting there saying, if he wants to commit to Oklahoma, you take the guy. Because in my opinion, I think he's a really talented player, really strong get off at the line of scrimmage, someone who knows how to shed blocks. And he's someone to me that really fits that one gap scheme based on penetration, especially in the interior where you have to get after it, whether it's the quarterback or running back. So as a result, I don't want to say that I was completely shocked, but maybe it caught me a little bit off guard because you just kind of felt like there was this big cloud of questions surrounding this decision. And as a result, we get an answer, and Oklahoma is the destination for now. We'll see how it pans out. But in my opinion, I think this is a really good get. What do you think?
I'm with you, but it's interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One, I want to include Arkansas and Missouri in here as top places for him to go, just in doing some looking around since last time we spoke. Arkansas would make a lot of sense because they're trying to rebuild in a meaningful way, and Pittman is a great motivator, and I really love that defensive scheme that they're going to run with Barry Odom, which is also one gap, which is also a variation of a five-man defensive back kind of look where your defensive line needs to be so good. They're basically saying, hey, we're going to run with the weak side defensive end in place of a outside linebacker, jack linebacker, rush in type, but it's the same concepts more or less with the way that they want to play fast and the way that they want to complement their up-tempo scheme. Same thing with Eli Drinkwitz and Missouri. I really like what they're doing. I think he took over a great program. I have heard nothing but good things, and here lately, both of those programs have had some wins, particularly as it relates to Black Lives Matter and these coaches getting across to their players what this means. Same thing goes for Lincoln Riley, who was full-throated in his support. I think that mattered as well. But when you look at Isaiah Coe, Oklahoma was the best offer he had. That tells me everything I need to know, especially for a kid coming out of junior college where it's going, no, you take the best offer you can get, because that's usually what happens, right? With Jermaine Johnson, or I think I got that right. Jermaine Johnson at Independence a couple years ago, number one player in JUCO, goes to Georgia, right? And then you continue to look around at what these kids usually do, and you look at their list, like Justin Harrington, his top spaces were NC State, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma. When it comes to junior college kids, it feels like Oklahoma ends up winning because Oklahoma's the best program offering. But in this particular instance, it's interesting, if for no other reason than I've kind of thought that... Go away. My God, I'm sorry about that. I kind of thought that there was something else for him to do. I thought that perhaps there was an Arkansas to go looking into, a Missouri to go looking into, and maybe you play yourself into a position where you don't have to take, say, the best offer that you have right now. Maybe you wait until you can take perhaps in Auburn that might pop up, because they're going to need some help with Big Cat Bryant going the other way. And they're going to lose another one. I forget his name off the top of my head, but like I like the fit. Right? I mean, 6'3", 285 pounds, fits right there with Perrion Winfrey. You only need one of those three to fit: Josh Ellison, Isaiah Coe, or, of course, Winfrey. And then you got Marcus Hicks, who I think is going to slide into that Jalen Redmond 3 technique kind of role. I mean, I liked it, but I also understand that, in recruiting, it's all a wash until they get signed in some instances. And even when they're signed now, it doesn't matter because the transfer portal exists.
Yeah, I think you brought up some interesting points there. Obviously, Arkansas is a program that's really ramped up its recruiting efforts, and I think they're kind of a program that's becoming maybe a hot destination. I know the Missouri Co is from Illinois, specifically the Chicago area, and Missouri is a program that really emphasizes Chicago recruiting. So there were some ties and maybe some favoring points for either of those programs. And then, you look at some of the other programs that we're in on, I think South Carolina, Ole Miss for sure was in the running in his top odd. Maybe Illinois was on the outside looking in, if I remember correctly. There were just a couple of other spots that you felt would be decent fits for him to go to. But, when you look at Isaiah Coe and you look at Oklahoma, to me, again, I go back to the points I've made on this podcast a couple of times, and I know that a lot of fans will say, okay, well then what does this mean moving forward?
Right.
If he is to take, does that impact the Marcus Burrises of the world, the
right.
Kelvin Gilliam,
right.
the David Abiaras, as we know the rumors are swirling? To me, this shouldn't. I know that it could, and that's something that the OU coaching staff has a little bit more of a sense of than I think we do at this stage. But again, great teams have deep defensive line rotations, and you win ball games on the line of scrimmage. So in my opinion, especially when you're coming off a year where, okay, you took 5 freshman offensive linemen and a transfer offensive lineman who's going to be around. You took, 5 defensive backs in the previous cycle as well. You got a lot of depth in classes before, so maybe this is the time, especially when you've built some momentum defensively, to go all in on getting as many top-tier defensive linemen as possible. I know that's going to cause some puzzle pieces to be put together and figure out how the scholarship numbers work. But, again, if I have the ability as an Oklahoma coach to take, 6 defensive linemen in 2021, I'm going to do it without blinking an eye. Again, I also feel like Coe is someone who helps them build a little bit more in the now. And as you know, I'm someone who personally believes that Oklahoma has to do whatever possible to make sure they're still keeping the momentum now and not focusing too much on the future. Because as we know, Oklahoma defense isn't always consistent. And with Grinch trying to continue to build that reputation, he has to make sure he has impact players coming in consistently. And that's not always a guarantee with prep players. So, again, we'll see how this situation sorts out. In my opinion, taking Coe is just something Oklahoma has to do and then work towards the rest of it later. If you have a guy who wants to be a part of the class right now and is committed to helping this program, I don't know why you shoot him away. I understand that a lot of people would want maybe the 4-star high school guy, but if there's a junior college defensive player that fits your scheme and has a passion for what you're trying to progress, I just don't know that closing him out is the best thing to do.
So I want to check something while you were talking to basically make the point that you're making about taking as many defensive linemen as you can. That 2019 class that everybody loves so much for good reason has 1 defensive tackle in the class, like 1 guy that is classified as a defensive tackle. Do you know who it is off the top of your head? Because I had to go 2019 because I had to go check myself to be sure that I was right about that.
Was it Jordan Kelly?
No, that's 2018. I know, right? It's Derek Green.
Derek Green.
Right. The others, Corey Roberson is a strong side defensive end. Marcus Hicks is considered a weak side defensive end, even being as enormous as he is. Joseph Wette, David Ugwegbu, those are weak side defensive ends. They had 1 true defensive tackle in that class. 1. And they just kind of kept stacking these tweeners, whether they're good or bad, right? In the case of Jalen Redmond, turns out to be a pretty good thing. But even that dude, is classified as an end in the 2018 class, not a tackle. They make him a tackle, right? LaRon Stokes comes in the 2019 class, plays almost right away, and is the defensive newcomer of the year, junior college kid. I look at it the way that you look at it. Because defensive line is such a priority for any team that wants to play for a national championship, I'm going to take defensive tackles before I take wide receivers, before I make room for running backs, before I make room for linebackers and defensive backs because there just ain't that many. You know, like I feel like we do this, or at least I do this more often than I want to, which is to say, show me the elite defensive tackles. Just show me the numbers. I'll show you 4 times as many wide receivers. I'll show you 4 times as many defensive backs. And I'll show you 3 times as many linebackers. Hell, I can make a good argument that there are fewer good quality defensive tackles than there are quarterbacks. I mean, if you got a kid that's already got the size and a little bit of the athleticism, and he would have to be to play high-level JUCO ball, right, and to be even flashing on tape, then you got to take it and you got to try to mold it. It's almost, for me, recruiting defensive tackles is like recruiting 7-footers. You know, you hope that the guy can shoot. You hope he can dribble. You hope you can teach him some footwork. But if he flashes even just a little bit of athleticism, you put him on your roster and you hope and pray. And if you develop Akeem Olajuwon or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you look great. If you spend that capital on Darko Milicic, well, you took the 7-footer, right? And that works. That works sometimes. It doesn't in other times. But I go back to this statistic that stayed with me for some time. Reading David Epstein's The Sports Gene. There are for every 12 7-footers there are, one of them plays in the NBA. Like for 1 out of every 12 7-footers in the entire world plays in the NBA. That's regardless of gender. You know, that's how I feel about defensive tackles. Because Clemson stacked them and immediately starts playing for national championships, right? Alabama can pride itself on its defensive tackle recruiting and its evaluation. Because remember, Quinnen Williams was not that much to write home about when he was being recruited. And they developed him into what? The number 3 draft pick? Number 3 overall, 2018? I got that right? 2019? 2019.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm with you. If he surprised you, that's on you as coaches. I mean, his date never moved. He told everybody what the date was. The only truck I had with him is he went a half hour early, you know, and as things go, not a big deal, right? Not a big deal. It's not Christian Leary moving his date entirely for reasons we can understand. But also, if you are Oklahoma, like any other program right now, why aren't you taking everybody? Because answer me this, what's in-person recruiting going to look like? Like, are we going to have officials?
I'm thinking there will be, but I just don't know what the extent will be. You know what I'm saying? I mean, will there be limitations put on official visits? Because, I mean, I have a hard time believing that the NCAA will just completely shut them down. But I also wonder, okay, will there be maybe time limits or restrictions as to how many places you can take them or where you can go with these players? I mean, things are going to look different. I think we can all kind of agree on that. So as a result, I mean, that's definitely going to have an impact on this recruiting world.
No, I'm with you. And I've been playing with this idea out in public, right? Because nobody can give me an answer. And that's one of my favorite things to do as a sports talk show host is talk about what nobody can give you a definitive answer about. But knowing what we know about recruiting and knowing what we know about the need for evaluation for us, for coaches, I'm talking about officials, right? That's what I'm talking about. What about unofficials? If kids can't actually go visit your school because either 1, there are rules in place, or 2, let's not forget, at one point last month, 40 million Americans did not have jobs. The unemployment rate is 13%. Even as we saw about 2 million people add jobs here, a lot of folks that have high school football players, junior college football players, are either looking for work or at best took a tremendous pay cut, right? So, I mean, all of this for me is factoring in that if you can take a commitment from a guy that you kind of like, let alone like, that hasn't visited your campus, you take it. You have to, right? Because if you're Tennessee, for instance, and they're taking everybody, they know that there's going to be some attrition, right? Because that's just part of this game. But if there are rules in place that limit the number of dudes that can actually go visit. And, you know, between the two of us, we can come up with 50 guys at each OU home game, right? That they're recruiting across classification. What if that number is cut by a 5th?
That's where decisions have to be made.
Right.
That's where things can get really shaky.
Right.
And I think it's a valid point to bring up. I mean, there's a very real possibility that Oklahoma is going to have to figure out who they want to recruit and how hard they want to recruit them,
right.
which is quite different than what you're usually used to. I mean, typically you just say, okay, everyone come on down to campus for X game or this moment on the calendar, and let's all have a good time. But, I mean, could you imagine if the Champ U barbecue, for example, if they choose to have one in, like, late August, it's like a VIP list? I mean, so people are going to get offended by the fact that they're not on that list. So I think that's something that's fascinating is what happens if you're not able to bring in everyone you want to? I mean, how do you sort this process? And if there's a guy that's willing to commit to your school and be a part of something, and he's at a position of need, and he doesn't need one of these visits, in my opinion, you just check the box. Am I off base there?
No, and that's where I'm at with most of this. And then I'll add another layer to this. So for the folks that would wonder why a commitment might be up in the air, forgetting whether or not it's committable or not, right? Because sometimes, like Alabama's notorious for this, they will give an offer to a kid and then let the kid know you got to show up to camp to earn the opportunity to commit to that offer, right? Meaning you got to find a way to get to Alabama's elite camp. You got to show out at Alabama's elite camp, and then you got to make it work, right? And that happens for a number of kids. I mean, Ethan Downs last year, who is for some the number one player in the state, right? He had to show up to elite camp, and as he told me, sweat his balls off before he could get that offer, because Oklahoma doesn't want to hand out an offer like that unless they know what they're getting, which means they get to see him and they get to push him a little bit. Now, in this extended period, dead, right? This dead period, the rules are a kid has to reach out to a coach before they can communicate. So there are no cold calls by the coaches. There are no text messages by the coaches. And we're going to go into about 4 months of this by the end of it, which means that if Isaiah Coe is not communicating on a regular basis with the coaches, they can't reach out to him and figure out, what they know or what they don't know, and vice versa, which is why the communication aspects of this have always been kind of fun to me and interesting, because what do you end up doing? You end up reading a kid's tweets. You end up following them on, or hey, can I get a friend request on Facebook or whatever, right? Because you don't
Scrolling through the like.
Yeah, and that's for the people that don't necessarily get there. That's what we're dealing with right now. If a kid doesn't want to talk to you, he doesn't have to talk to you. If you gave him an offer and he doesn't check to see if that offer is committable or the landscape has changed, you're up a creek. And here's the thing. He could commit and you would have to publicly take that commitment even as he doesn't talk to you about committing to play for you, which I find to be the most funny thing about all of this. And this is the reason I love talking about recruiting, right? It's not the flesh part of it where we're talking about 6'3", 285, although that's important. It's that these kind of snafus, situation normal, all effed up, can really happen because of the dead period and because nobody knows nothing. So you got kids that are committing, and I'm sure that this has happened across the country. Kids have committed to play at places where coaches don't have the opportunity to be like, hey, can we talk about this? Can we talk about this? And then the Jansen Dunn thing happened, right? During the dead period.
Oh, yeah.
And that was weird because it was like, I'm committing to Oklahoma, but he didn't necessarily know that he could commit to Ohio State because, well, he's got to talk to them first. And apparently that happened. And I'm going, wait a second. This is awesome. Because, coaches are going, oh, man, are you kidding? You mean I could go get this kid, but I already offered this kid, but I can't move him around anymore? This is chaos. I hate this. I'm sorry. Colin, am I laughing too much? Am I having too much of a good time here?
Well, I think you should have as much fun as you want to when we're talking about this because, it is kind of chaos. And I think, as we've talked about before, kids are committing at a faster rate than ever before. I know that Josh Pate, one of our 24/7 Sports video guys, took a dive into it. And, the speed and haste at which these players are committing is unlike anything we've ever seen before. Mm-hmm. And I think coaches are kind of caught off guard by that as well, which is what you're talking about. I think a lot of guys are finding out that they have an addition to their class via Twitter. Mm-hmm. And that's where this is going to be incredibly fascinating to me once whatever happens in the fall when we talk about official visits or what have you actually gets to play out. Right. Because, I'm a firm believer that we're going to see an absolute mess once things reopen. I mean, decommitments, scholarship offers that are committable or non-committable, all of this is going to come to the forefront. And so this is where, for me, I'm starting to have a little fun. You talk about what's happening in the now. What does this mean for the future?
Oh, man.
And as we talked about it, I mean, Isaiah Coe's commitment right now definitely has an impact, but think about the number of different commitments across the country that could easily be switched or sorted out come November. I mean, you just don't know how this thing's going to shake out, and that's where, to me, I'm really excited to see it all come to fruition. I mean, I'm a firm believer that you're going to see absolute chaos whenever kids are able to be on campus in person, whatever that may look like come college football season.
So there's another angle to this, right? So you got a kid that reaches out to a coach and they're talking, and the coach is going, what are you thinking about this school, right? Let's call it X school. Well, at X school, we're only taking like 2 running backs, and I got this other kid that kind of wants your spot if you have that sort of leverage. That kid pulls the trigger right there, because what do we know about the kids? They're smart and they're going, I don't want to lose my spot. That's what it is. So you rent a room until maybe you could trade up, or what you saw last year, and you see every year, quite honestly, but I'm using LSU as an example because it happened with them in the biggest way. They know that they have the best team in college football. They're playing for an SEC championship where they're about to roll over Georgia, and then they are rolling over Georgia. And you see kid after kid reopen his recruitment or flip his commitment to elsewhere. And I love that the kids are getting to be a little brazen about this and just putting it out there going, nah, they're kicking people out the boat. Like, that's what it is. Like I had been committed for however long, and then they found out that they wanted this other kid that they like a little bit more than me. I mean, Major Burns ends up at Georgia. He was going to LSU. Right? I mean, it's like that. And I know why many people don't talk about this side of recruiting that often. I get that. But I feel like the more that we have conversations about it, the more people know about it, the better that it's going to get. It's kind of like with evaluations. We've gotten so much better at evaluating kids over the last 20 years, right? Our 5 stars pan out more often than not. 4 stars pan out more often than not. Usually pretty good at projecting this stuff because we've just gotten better at it. We would be so much better at talking about recruiting in the off season if we started talking about these conversations more. But now it's kind of coming out because it doesn't have a choice. There's lots of stuff that's coming out because you don't have a choice, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm sitting here writing down stuff like, do I want to do this topic? Do I want to do that topic? I would really love to be able to talk about football right now. And what do we end up doing? We end up doing deep dives on how fast kids are committing. Because kids are going, I don't know when I'm going to be able to leave the house. I don't know when I'm going to be able to visit. I'm going to commit to the last place that I went to. Yeah, that way I know that I'm going at least to somewhere I kind of sort of like. And what's to stop them? Nothing. Because it's kind of like the run on toilet paper. People will do irrational things when you cannot demonstrate to them what the future is going to look like. Because we're all creatures of habit. We all like knowing stuff. We all like having stuff. And we will hoard stuff that does not need to be hoarded because we can't predict the future. Speaking of not being able to predict the future, Joe Castiglione gave some comments about tickets, which I know matters to more than a few people. So the system that they have in place is the system they're going with, right? Which is the longer that you have been a season ticket holder, the longer that you have donated to the university, the longer you had your seat license, the longer you renewed your tickets, the higher up in priority you go. Now, this is going to be real interesting if we go into a season where we have limited capacity, not just at Memorial Stadium, but across the country, right? Because Texas says you can have 50% capacity right now at college sport venues. I'm going, that's great, knowing that there's no college sports going on. Great, awesome. DKR could hold 50,000 people to not watch a football game right now. But what this says to me, because it was 30% a few weeks ago, is that they're probably going to get to 100% by the start of the season. Okay? I don't know if that's what's going to be at Oklahoma. I don't know what the protocol is going to have to be like, whether you get forehead temperatures and masks and whatnot. I know this. West Point has 38,000 seats. That's a third of what Oklahoma has. And I venture to say there are 38,000 people that would love to go to West Point to watch OU Army. I submit to you, 38,000 people ain't going to get tickets to go watch OU Army, at least from the University of Oklahoma. With that in mind, what do you think? You think that we're going to see like scalping of tickets, or you think people are going to be like, it's cool, I was going to stay home anyway, because either one, I don't have the money to go, or two, I don't feel safe going?
First of all, I'm just so excited if we do hit capacity limits to see what ticket prices end up being, especially those scalp tickets, because those people are going to try and get out there and immediately make absolute bank. I think for me, first of all, when you talk about the system, I mean, no one should be shocked by that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we could all kind of piece together a formula that say, okay, you're a season ticket holder, you've been a donor for a while, you're definitely going to get in the stadium, whereas if you haven't been, you're probably on the outside looking at it. That being said, to me, what's really fascinating is, okay, if there is capacity limitations, I would also be led to believe that if you are limiting capacity, you are also implementing some sort of social distancing within the stadium. So to make sure that those admitted in the game are still staying safe as far as how they're relating to other attendees. So then what does that look like? I mean, are you going to tell someone who's been a season ticket holder and has had X seat in the stadium that they must move in order to be accommodating of social distancing rules? Because then I'm not so sure how many people would actually be willing to do that. I mean, let's be honest. There are people of varying ages that go to OU football games, and slapping someone out in the sun probably isn't the best for them regardless of what you're asking to do inside the stadium. So then where does that ticket go? I mean, I don't think that we all can be stunned by this. I just find it very fascinating as to how, in the end, this will be handled if they do allow those season ticket holders and donors in, but must find ways to still follow some sort of health guidelines within it. I mean, again, I'm someone who believes that there will probably be less and less limitations as we get closer to college football season. You mentioned Texas. I know that Texas is in a much worse position than Oklahoma right now when it comes to COVID-19 cases. So for me, if Oklahoma and their governing bodies are willing to be a little bit more open for sporting events, then by all means, I don't think Oklahoma fans have much to worry about right now. But again, this is all a great unknown. I think that to this point, I would agree with Joe C's take and system, but you just don't know what it's going to look like come the fall. And I think that for me is what's going to be fascinating. If all of these what ifs come into play, how do you sort through them?
I think about these things more often than I want to admit when it comes to virus and how we're responding. Look, man, in light of the recent week and even before it, when we started reopening stuff, it's gone, right? The opportunity to scale back is gone. The moment that we reopen business in any way, right, the moment we started mingling again, that opportunity is gone. Right now, it's hope and wish, right? And as long as it's hope and wish, going back to business as usual is a matter of social mores, right? It's a matter of, do we look bad doing this? Because whether or not it's safe anymore is gone. It's gone. You know, we were protesting in the street, or at least I was. And we have been standing next to each other with masks on, with gloves on, whatever. There have been hundreds of us in the street. And before that, there were hundreds of us going to restaurants, going to the grocery store, going to where the gym. The Petri dish grew once again. And a couple of days ago, Texas saw its highest number of COVID-19 cases it's seen during this whole thing. The only way that you would be able to stop this train is to stop it hard once again. And nobody wants to do that, right? That's the thing. The people that want to do it are in the minority. Like, I've stopped talking about what it might look like for us to slow down because I don't see it happening, right? I just have to make peace with it as much as I possibly can. With that in mind, if you're just thinking about football and you don't really care about, safety that way, you just don't want to be the guy that looks bad or the woman that looks bad saying, I don't care, then yeah, everything's going to continue apace. We're going to start the season on August 29th with a slate of bad football games that include Arizona, Hawaii as the marquee matchup. Then we're going to get to September 5th when everybody else starts playing football. And we're going to see how the folks in charge try to tiptoe around and implement guidelines that make them look good as opposed to are safe. Because I think they're going to be safe, but I also think it's about optics right now. Because we had the Big Ten and the ACC and the Pac-12 basically kind of punt. The SEC said, nah, June 8th, get to work. Big 12 said June 15th, get to work. Everybody else said, hey, you guys come up with whatever it is you want to come up with, and, that's fine. Meanwhile, we got Mark Emmert going, hey, not all 130 FBS teams going to be able to play football. And what you got back from Congress was mostly like, well, if they can't afford to play football, that's on them. Make it happen. Because I need to add here, the minority whip that was leading this conference call is from the first congressional district in Louisiana. And he is a diehard LSU Tiger and New Orleans Saints fan. And he wants to be in the stands watching Drew Brees beat up on Tom Brady and watching the LSU Tigers defend their national championship. He said as much. You tell me, Colin, hearing that, what do you think's going to happen?
Oh, he's going to be getting some football. I mean, he will not be denied.
Right.
I think you're right on there. There's no turning back. I think we can all agree that the whole concept of another quarantine, it's just not going to happen. And again, I think we would both err on the side of safety, but I think we both also understand that once people set their mind to something or they perceive a threat as less than it is, there's just simply no turning around. So there's going to be football. I mean, that guy's probably going to get some LSU Tigers action and some New Orleans Saints action at some point. It's just, again, we have no idea how you find that perfect balance of getting back to the status quo and business as usual while accounting for the fact that there is something very real that hasn't necessarily been solved. So I don't know, man. There's just so many things to say, and yet there's so many things that can be said over and over again. I'm fascinated to see how people who are in a greater position than I am figure out what exactly is the course of action and find a way to put it into place in the most effective and safest way possible.
That is Colin Kennedy. He is a staff writer at OUinsider.com. Read his work there. Does excellent work. Colin, dude, I call you to do these things. You're like, yeah, man, say when. And you come with the goods, and I sincerely appreciate you.
Hey, it's always fun, man. Let's do it again soon. And, hey, I appreciate everyone who's been listening to the show.
All right. That's Colin Kennedy. We'll talk to you guys next week.